Welcome back guys to another Cyberpunk video. I long debated with myself about actually making a melee build, but I finally had the time to do that, and it is no less than simply the best melee build ever. This build is dealing so much damage with your melee weapons you will actually not want to switch back to any rifle again. You will deal over 100,000 damage with melee weapons such as the baseball bat. You will perfectly electrocute any enemy in Night City, including any giant robots, which simply explode when you hit them with your small little Tinkerbell weapon. And on top of that, I made this build completely unkillable. This build has so much hit points that you will actually not have to use Sandevistan at all. You will simply be able to tank any possible hit from all your enemies, even on very hard. Similar to my previous builds, I also decided to make this attack 12 builds. That means you are limited to craft only epic items, but since epic items almost deal the same damage as legendary ones, it is totally negligible, and the amount of armor and damage you lose from your mods are actually negligible as well. If you still want to play with legendary items, of course you can still buy them from the shops, and they will also offer you some epic mods as well. So you don't really lose anything, you will just gain 6 points, which you can spend much better elsewhere. And of course we will also go for a lot of mercenaries levels to get up to 100% crit chance and 300% critical damage with any weapon at any time. This build is really close to being completely immortal, because when you activate Berserk you will have over 966 hit points, and when you also have the biomonitor in your build, then you will simply double up on that to be almost 2000, and when you then also have second heart you will basically have 3 lives. That means you will actually have almost 3000 hit points or 3 lives in total, so you can completely ignore all your enemies anyway. And that will allow you to use Berserk instead of Sandevistan and deal massive damage with all your melee weapons. But that doesn't mean that you can't slow down time. You can still do that at any time by using Kerenzikov. So you will have the best of both worlds, a perfect melee build with Berserk and Beast mode, including the ability to still slow down time whenever you need to. Kerenzikov might sound a bit difficult at the beginning, but it is totally worth to learn it. In order to slow down time with Kerenzikov, you have to hold your aim button, then move in any direction and double tap the dodge button. That will immediately slow down time for about 6 seconds by 90%, which is just as strong as the strongest Sandevistan, and it always has a cooldown of only 2 seconds. My weapon selection for the melee build might surprise some of you, because I didn't use that small little vibrating rubber thing, which is called Sir John Fallowstiff. If you want to maximize your damage on a single hit, you actually have to use the slowest weapon possible, because that one will deal the highest amount of damage per hit before it deals another hit. That is simply how DPS works. So the baseball bat was actually the sweet spot of being very slow, but still very useful and easy to handle. The hammer was actually way worse. And there's also a really good gold-plated baseball bat which you get from Johnny's storyline, so it is really the best thing to use here. But if you want to have some real fun with this build, and especially when there are robots, then definitely pick up the Tinkerbell. The Tinkerbell is an iconic electronic baton which can simply use to electrocute all your enemies and especially your robots. And when you do that on robots, they will always immediately explode, which is so much fun. The Tinkerbell can be obtained in River's storyline, and you will definitely know why the evil boys like to use it. Of course you can also simply use your fists. With the gorilla arms you will still be able to deal over 80,000 damage. It's not the 100,000 damage from the baseball bat, but more than enough to give Ozop a really bloody nose. But now let's finally check out the build, guys. Of course, on our first spot we will use the gold-plated baseball bat. It doesn't have 2000 DPS like Sir John Fallowstiff, but the combination of DPS and the attack speed actually makes this weapon deal the most damage per single hit. So the slower a weapon actually hits, the more damage you will get per single hit, and that's the reason why the baseball bat is actually dealing more damage per hit than any weapon that has a higher DPS and a faster hit rate. Since we already have very high critical damage, it is more important to increase our base DPS, so we use 2 cold shoulder mods in this weapon. Because if you add 10% critical damage on top of 300%, it is only a 3% increase. But with cold shoulder you get a 5% increase for your DPS, so that is actually more. A second weapon I really fell in love with is the electronic Baton Tinkerbell, which also has a very high DPS with 1545. Since electrical weapons always cause a short circuit on any robot, this weapon is really very effective and still very fun to use even against normal enemies. I simply love the fact that you actually just electrocute all your enemies. Similar to the baseball bat, we'll also use 2 cold shoulder mods to further increase our DPS. The third weapon can either be a katana or a rifle if you need a weapon that hits on long range. For a katana I definitely prefer the Inshimaru because thanks to its combo multipliers it deals more damage even without Merciless being active, so it makes it easier to kill your first enemy without Merciless. We'll also use cold shoulder mods here of course. If you want to use a rifle as a backup in this build, I recommend to get a legendary Ajax with an MK Clearview, a silencer and 4 crunch mod so you can make use of all the stealth damage you get from cool. The closing items are not very spectacular. I actually managed to get a headpiece which already has a 4% critical damage engraved on it. So whenever you find a closing piece that already has crit chance or crit damage, then definitely use it. Other than that, I simply used blue armadillo mods in all of my other closings except for my eyewear where I used a 4% crit chance, and in my trousers I also used a super insulator mod to make me immune versus any shock, because with Tech 12 I can't use the perk from the engineering tree. The Cyberware is quite a bit different than previous builds and it also requires a special skill set to get all of them. In our frontal cortex we get the legendary heal on kill, which will stack with the heal on kill from Berserk, so for every kill you get 15% health back when you kill your enemies. Then we get the rare mechatronic core and there is simply nothing left to put in the third slot. Since this is not a gun or rifle build, I totally went for 3 weak spot detection in our Kiroshi optics. That will give you another 6% of crit chance and literally save you 6 skill points which you don't have to invest into Merciless. If you want to play with any rifles or guns, definitely get the trajectory analyzers in any other build. Trajectory analyzers will give you 75% additional headshot damage and it is way better except if you go melee. Another change is that we use a legendary biomonitor which you can get from the Ripper Dog in the Badlands that will literally give you a third life together with second heart, so you really don't have to care about taking any damage, you will survive it anyway. Then of course the legendary bioconductor reduces all the cooldowns for your Berserk, second heart and biomonitor by 30%. In the immune system, as usual, we go for the metabolic editor, which grants you immunity versus poison, and the pain editor, which reduces all incoming damage by 10%. The nervous system will host the legendary Kerenzikov together with the epic nanorelays, which will prolong the duration of Kerenzikov for up to 6 seconds. Of course we get the 300 additional armor points, the legendary optical camo and the heat converter, which converts all incoming thermal damage and make you deal more damage instead. For our operating system I picked the Militech Berserk Mark V because this one gives you over 40% more health, which is really important if you just want to run around and don't care about taking any damage. The reason why we use Berserk in a melee build is of course to get Beast Mode, because Beast Mode will increase all your melee damage by 100%, which is simply doubling all your melee damage. And by adding 2 more Bruising Berserks you will get another 47% of melee damage. So in total this Berserk mod actually multiplies all your melee damage by a factor of 2.5. Of course you could go for Thunder Wisdom instead if you like this one more, but then you will only deal around 30% of the damage you could potentially deal with Berserk. So if you want to make a serious melee build, I definitely recommend you to use Berserk, and if you want to slow down, then you can still do that with Kerenzikov. In your skeleton you can of course go for the damage increase from Dance Marrow, but I think using the epic skeleton that gives you 50% health is a much better and much nicer bonus. And using the legendary micro rotors is much better than using any Dance Marrow or other damage increases, because the micro rotors greatly improve your DPS of any melee weapons. That means any katana and any blunt weapon such as a baseball bat or Tinkerbell. So the micro rotors is a must-have item, much better than Dance Marrow or anything else you can put here. Using Smart Link or not is not really important since we don't use any smart weapons, I just have it as a backup. In your gorilla arms you should definitely go for the Animal's Knuckles, the Black Market Battery for another 100% damage, and the Sensory Amplifier that gives you 20% critical damage. And of course don't forget the Tendons for your double jump. For the skills I used a very unique distribution with 20 cool, 12 tech and 18 reflex and 18 body. Even though we don't go all in on body or reflex, 18 body and 18 reflex actually unlocks the best cyberware combination you can get for any build and especially for any melee build. You can still get the legendary micro rotors from a high reflex level, you can still use all the best berserk cyberware, you can get the legendary bioconductor, second heart, biomonitor, you will be able to use everything, even the legendary heal on kill. We will start with the cool tree. In ninjutsu we actually only get the assassin, which gives us 15% additional damage for all human enemies, and then in cold blood we invest exactly 68 points on merciless, because 68 is the magic number that will actually exactly give you 100% crit chance with all your melee weapons. Because all your melee weapons have exactly 2% crit chance, and 68 Merciless gives you 72% crit chance from Merciless, then you have 26% on your character sheet and 2% on any melee weapon. That is exactly 100%. In this build we'll pick up Blood Brawl to increase our melee damage, and then of course all the perks that initiate Cold Blood and keeps it alive as long as possible, such as Coagulant, Cold and Calculating, Critical Condition and Coldest Blood. In the tech tree we only go for True Craftsman, Grease Monkey and Field Technician to increase the damage for our crafted melee weapons. In the body tree we will go for Pack Mule and Regeneration, and then for melee builds it is most important to get Steel and Chrome for an additional 20% damage on all your melee weapons. Of course we also grab Tenacious V, Invincible for another 15% health and Steel Shell for another 10% armor. In the Street Baller tree we basically go for anything that increases our damage, such as Crushing Blow, Fury, Frenzy and Payback. Anything that increases our damage under certain conditions, such as stun or bleeding or whatever, is not useful because we will kill our enemies in a single hit anyway, so we will never actually have any of these effects on our enemies. The only really useful health regeneration perk under Street Brawler is Rush, because it gives you back 3% health for any successful hit. And if you still have a couple of points left, you can buff either your blades or your assault skills depending on which weapon you picked on your third slot. I went for some of the blade skills, got Roaring Water, Sting Like a Bee, Judge, Jury, Executioner for another 100% damage on every enemy who is at full health, Fury Blast and Death Bolt to give me a lot of health back whenever I make a kill. This build has a really awesome skill distribution, feel free to use it in any other build, also for assault weapons or handguns. You will just get all the best cyberware in the game with it. I hope you really like it, please don't forget to subscribe, leave me a like and see you next time.